back. Castro's going to carry that all the way up. Nice little move. That's a couple of Butte players run into each other. That's going to go down. They have to hustle if they want to get one more rush. 9 seconds remaining on the power play. Finneman now is going to carry it up 2 seconds. They'll put Butte at full strength. 2-0 coming.
It's October 27th, 2018. It's the last night of a string of games to benefit cancer awareness for the Yellowstone quake. This is me in net, and these are 2 players with all the time in the world to score on me. If you told me I'd be here at the end of last year, I wouldn't believe you. If you told me that we had a chance to win this game last night, I might not believe that either. Yet here I am, tending a goal 2,000 miles away from Vermont, in one of the least populated states in the U.S. The last 8 months of my life leading up to this moment have been filled with some of the hardest adversity I've ever had to face. In the next couple of seconds, I have the opportunity to change all that for the better. To be able to fully understand where I came from to this moment, we'll have to travel back to where it all started. Welcome to my struggles. To find out how I got to Wyoming, we have to travel back to late March of 2018. This month would mark the last games I played with my 2 former teams from last season, the Vermont Lumberjacks and CVU Redhawks. The success I had with both teams varied quite a bit, as both teams had significantly different years. For CVU, I would finish the season with a .899 save percentage and a 3.14 goals against average. Technically speaking, these were pretty good stats, but not great. This was expected, however, as CVU's depth diminished significantly with the loss of players like Richard Hall, Tyler Brooks, and Mac Miller, and the graduation of players such as Nate Shanks, Joe Parento, and Colin Locke, just to name a few. Also leaving CVU's core was state championship winning coach Mike Murray and his whole staff, who would be replaced by former player and assistant football coach J.P. Benoit. The dawn of a rebuild was on the horizon for CVU this season. The Lumberjacks, on the other hand, that was a different story. During my time with the Lumberjacks, I would post an impressive .947 save percentage and goals against average of 1. Though this was through limited playing time behind 2 veteran junior goalies, it still showed I was capable of playing at a higher level. After both teams' postseasons were ended by the Essex Hornets and Boston Junior Rangers, both filled with their fair share of controversy, it was time to start thinking about where I should play for next season. Unfortunately, it would appear the Lumberjacks were going down a similar rebuilding route that CVU was going through, as this would be the last season for young talents such as the Schmidt brothers and Tyler Murray, all 3 of whom were nominees for Mr. Hockey in Vermont high school hockey, and veterans such as Zach Watkins, Matt Emilio, and Dylan Mensing, who had all won their fair share of Player of the Month and Week awards for their respective positions. Looking for advice on where to play for next year, I sought out Luke Krupa, a former high school all-star for the Spalding Crimson Tide and accomplished junior hockey player, for advice. He would tell me to try out for 2 teams, CP Dynamo of Clifton Park, New York, and New York Skipjacks of York, Pennsylvania. The Dynamo and Skipjacks, both located in the USPHL, are 2 of the most highly touted teams in U18 AAA hockey in the Northeast. 2/3 of the Lumberjacks veterans I mentioned in the previous chapter first started their careers with the Dynamo, and the Skipjacks have been producing skilled college-level players for years, such as Aiden Harper, who's already committed to UMass Lowell, currently ranked 16th in NCAA Division I men's ice hockey. These were 2 prestigious teams. Not just anyone who could lace up a pair of skates could make them. However, I believe that I could do it. Starting around mid-April, a 2-day-long trial was held up in Clifton Park. Unfortunately for me, the Skipjacks trials overlapped with the Dynamos, so if I didn't make the Dynamo, I would only have 1 day for the evaluators in New York to look at me, which meant that I couldn't afford to loaf at any point during either tryout. After 3 hours of travel, I would arrive for Dynamo tryouts, and after 2 days of life or death play, I got an answer from the coach. Maybe. Turns out, 2 of the goalies at the tryout were signed way in advance of the actual tryout, leaving one spot open, which he was thinking about saving for another goalie who hadn't made his mind up about whether he would come back to the team or not. He made sure not to discredit my skills, however, reassuring me that he turned away 3 to 4 other goalies thinking about trying out after seeing my highlights. And that if the aforementioned goalie were to decline coming back to the team, the job was mine. I was told I would get an answer that night about my position, which for me meant I had to get ready to ship off to York. After an all-night 5-hour-long drive to York, I was ready to try out for the Skipjacks, or as ready as I would ever be. This tryout would be considerably different from the Dynamos based on the scope of the amount of players trying out. There were about 20 goalies present during the designated goalie session they had, which for me meant stiff competition. Add with the fact that I had half as much time as everyone else to make an impression, the odds did not seem to be in my favor. After the tryouts were over though, I was pleasantly surprised to be one of the 7 or so people to be called after the final ice session was over. This wasn't just out of the 20 goalies, but the 3 tryout teams of 20 or so players as well. The tryout teams were basically forwards who were split up by jersey color so they could simulate games against each other. From my estimation, that was a grand total of 80 people or so. After getting undressed, the 7 of us would get a tour of the facilities within the rink and get an individual conversation with the coach. My conversation had 2 phrases etched into my mind afterwards. "Jacob, we really like you here," and "we'll send you a contract within the week." I wouldn't hear back from either coach for over a month. One goalie on the Skipjacks went out of his way to ask me about why I haven't gotten a contract yet. I could only speculate about why I got no response after various attempts to make contact with the coach. While the Dynamo coach would get back to me, despite being a month later than when he said he'd actually respond to me, my chance to be on the team evaporated when my being on the roster violated the team's out-of-state import status. 2 coaches made verbal agreements to me about being on their team. Now I was left with nothing. Despite being so close but ultimately getting spots yanked away from me in the worst possible fashion, I persevered and strived to get better in pursuit of a contract for next season. I would start by working with Washington Capitals goalie coach and Stanley Cup winner Mitch Korn to sharpen my skills. This camp would serve to be the most physically demanding and educational camp I would attend up until the making of this video. With Korn, I learned many new subtle nuances to improve my quality as a goaltender while simultaneously enhancing my core abilities. I credit much of my successes this season to the lessons taught to me by him during my time at this camp. I would even get an award afterwards from the staff and Mitch, a bounty paper towel roll, symbolizing my absorbent mind and goaltending technique during the duration of his camp. Winning this award would further fuel me to work as hard as I could for the contract I coveted. After Mitch's camp, I would get an opportunity to work with various pros and collegiate athletes during the remainder of the summer. NHL pros such as Ben Lovejoy and Gavin Bayreuther would be here, along with Anthony Petruzzelli, a former UVM alumni and prospect climbing up the NHL's minor ranks. Among others to show up were Matt Anderson, a former player for Rögle BK in the Swedish Hockey League, Eli Wheeler, an elite defenseman from Winchendon Prep, and various Dartmouth players inspired to come based on the insistence of Dartmouth alumni Ben Lovejoy. These are undoubtedly the best shooters I've faced during my career, which gave me ample time to iron out the kinks of my style and further put into practice ideas shown to me by Mitch Korn. During these sessions, I was often the only goalie there, which meant I didn't get many opportunities to rest. While I would consider this to be a downside of these skates initially, looking back it helped increase my endurance, which I would utilize a lot over the duration of the season. After a month of reaching out to various teams, I would finally get a contract offer, coming from the Lehigh Valley Junior Rebels of the EHL, a newly created expansion team for the top committing junior hockey league in the country. Granted, this was a new team, which more than likely meant that the odds would really be stacked against the team in its inaugural season this year. But how bad could it really be? Worse than I could have possibly imagined. While my time with Lehigh Valley was swift in comparison to the rest of my season, there's still a lot that happened during my time with the organization that stood out during the course of this season. I wouldn't be in the situation I presented earlier if it wasn't for the Rebels. To sum up my time in the Valley, there was good, there was bad, and unfortunately there was a whole lot of ugly. So let's start with the good. The neighborhood I stayed in was very nice, and the billets I stayed with, Jake and Sandy Urso, were sweet and outgoing people. The equipment manager for the team was extremely professional, having worked with the AHL's Lehigh Valley Phantoms prior to this. He made sure that our skates were sharp, equipment was clean, and so on and so forth. My billet brother Ethan Gill was great to me during my whole time with Lehigh. We spent a lot of time together during this whole ordeal and got to swap a lot of stories with one another. That's about where the positives end, however. The players on the team sucked. The coaching staff was unbelievably terrible. The rink itself was one of the worst rinks I've ever played in my life. Everything there was just a complete disaster, especially from a goalie standpoint. When you have 7 goalies during a training camp for one team, you know that you got yourself into some deep trouble. I knew that as an expansion team this organization would struggle, but I had no idea it was this bad. It was one of the worst teams I've ever been on. So I'm very fortunate that I wasn't there for a very long time. Within 2 weeks of the time that I arrived there, nothing within the organization had changed to make it more appealing for me, which subsequently led me to asking for a trade to another team. I never got to play any games for the Rebels. I was lucky enough to get picked up very quickly by the Yellowstone Quake, which is how I ended up in. After a whole day of travel, I arrived in Cody, Wyoming, the home of the Yellowstone Quake of the NA3HL. Obviously, going to Wyoming to play hockey seems like a decision straight out of left field, but believe it or not, the Quake were pretty damn good. Just over the past 2 years, they had won their divisional championships twice, and just last year they were part of the 4-team Fraser Cup Championship Series out of 34 teams in the NA3HL. Last year, they had 4 30-goal scorers on their team. To say the Quake were a team to be reckoned with was an understatement. Things were shifting in the organization, however, when I got there. Prolific coach Ryan Theros, who was at the helm for the past several years for the team, had resigned from the organization, and a great deal of the players had also left the organization. I didn't look at this as a huge deal, however. I'm sure with the team's impressive pedigree that we'd be able to fill those spots in no time. We would start the season with a 4-game series against the Quake's cross-state rival, the Great Falls Americans. I was told that fellow goalie Michael Allman and I would operate as a tandem, meaning we'd alternate who starts every other game. Michael started the first game, posting an impressive 70-save performance, but ultimately falling 3-2 to the Americans. This had me worried, however. The Quake only managed to muster 26 shots during the whole game. Though he fortunately got 2 goals out of this, our shot totals paled in comparison to the 73 GFA put up. I didn't have much time to think this over as I was going in the next day in hopes of getting win number 1 of the year. Within the first couple of minutes, it would appear everything was going well. Dylan Rumpke would start off the scoring for the game with an early one against the Americans' goaltender. It seemed the momentum was in the Quake's favor, when suddenly, Ryan Lovelace would take a bone-shattering hit, and we would somehow get penalized 2 men. I wouldn't be distracted by this, however, as a GFA player would release a rocket from the top of the circles that I would save with a flash of my glove. Having to kill off a 5-on-3 penalty within the opening period of a game disrupts the flow of a team immensely, as PK players become weaker every second they're out there, and seeing how we haven't gotten the puck out of our zone, we can't substitute for fresh legs. As penalty time dwindled away, Great Falls got their first golden opportunity with a beautiful dish to the hash marks. As the player received the puck, I moved out to challenge. His hips were angled towards my blocker side, and he was looking towards the upper right corner. It was a save I'd made hundreds of times before. The puck would hit Luke Harkey's stick as he just stood in front of the net. The puck changed direction to my glove side, and like that, it was even. I would make another nice save on an unprotected GFA player hounding the net, but seemed to do little as our energy and morale was depleted. GFA would score the exact same goal again, the only difference being that it wasn't an own goal from one of my own players, but a screen tip. I spent a little extra time staring at the puck this time, wondering, how could this happen again? A third desperation stop going from left to right with no back pressure made a simple statement for us. We had stopped playing. GFA would put an end to my night early in the game as a player walked uncontested down the circles and scored one of the cleanest short side snipes I've ever bared witness to. And that was it for me. I would be relieved by Michael Allman in an attempt to encourage a comeback, in the words of my coach. The game could have easily been 6-0. With 2 tips in the snipe, it's hard to blame the goaltender, but that's what happened. It only made things worse as Michael Allman would disintegrate at the hands of Great Falls. Of course, it didn't help that our carelessness extended to our playstyle. Our selfish plays led to bone-crushing hits and a fear of injury if we were to provide any sort of resistance. They just walked over us. I look back at this game not being disappointed, but being left with unfinished business on my hands. I thought I should have stayed in for the whole game. Well, that's what most goalies think when they're pulled. It's a matter of pride. I knew as soon as Michael let in the first 5-hole goal that this would be a blowout. It was inevitable. They were just the better team. The game was decided after the first penalty. This wouldn't be the end of these beatdowns, however, as next weekend GFA would blank us 6-0. Expecting to get the start for the 4th game, I was told moments before going into the arena that Michael would be starting over me again. Riding the tired Michael would result in another loss, however, and did little to further the team in getting its first win. Despite telling both Michael and I that we were a tandem, we weren't splitting time the way a tandem normally would, though he would continue to emphasize he still had trust in me. It was obvious to the outsider looking in that he was starting to favor Michael over me. After GFA's 4-game domination for us had ended, it was time to focus on Butte Cobras. I was told by the coach that I would get both games during the weekend in Butte. Once again, this is not how a goalie tandem operates. Though I appreciate the extra game time, going back-to-back on games as a goalie is less than healthy, and provides a great chance of getting injured as your body doesn't have the time it needs to recover between the 2 games. Each coaching decision made me doubt the professionalism and legitimacy of the coach more and more. It was getting difficult to deal with. As we arrived in Butte, I put out my best to try and secure a first win of the season. After 2 weekends of being dominated by the Great Falls Americans, Quake had a chance to get back on the right track against the Butte Cobras. The start of this game, however, would not go very well for us, as Butte would come hard out of the gate, causing me to make several key saves, including a tough breakaway opportunity only 3 minutes into the game. Despite early Cobra dominance, the Quake would be the ones who would strike first, with a goal that was not caught on film due to shoddy camera equipment. Fantastic. The camera would, however, capture our second goal, which brought us up 2-0 with about 4 minutes left in the period. The Cobras would strike back quickly, however, as Robin Bagley centered a shot only a couple feet away from the net and was able to get his own rebound to make it a 1-goal game. It seemed like the Quake were sleepwalking here as Bagley was able to nestle into the front of the net with almost no resistance from the Quake. I made a first good stop here, but when you're that close and have all the time in the world to get your own rebound, it's almost inevitable that you're going to score. Of course, we couldn't leave the period 2-1, as the Cobras would notch another tally onto the board through a screened bomb from the point that went bar down. After 1 period, it was 2-2, with momentum being on Butte's side going into the second. Butte would come out swinging once again, laying on the body early and throwing prime opportunities on net. They get another odd-man rush early on in the period that I would snuff out as I moved across the crease. I wasn't going to let this game spiral out of control like it did against GFA. Butte would nearly get a second breakaway if it weren't for a clutch stick tech from newly acquired defenseman Zach Kelly. Mere seconds after his poke check, however, Butte would come in on another breakaway and catch me on my high glove to give them the first lead of the game. It was becoming increasingly obvious that outside of Zach Kelly, the Quake had no defensive depth whatsoever, whether it be in the lack of net front presence or their inability to back check effectively. Becoming more and more obvious that we would only win games if the offense was rolling and whoever was in net was standing on their head. Now down by a 1-goal deficit with half the game remaining, the offense went back to work to regain the lead. Capitalizing on a 5-on-3 power play, Dylan Rumpke would tie the game up for the Quake with 12 left in the period. Seconds after Rumpke's tying goal, Captain Luke Harkey would put us ahead by 1 thanks to a feed from me that would send him end-to-end where he would tuck the puck in 5-4 on Butte's goalie. Goalies assisting on goals are relatively rare in hockey, so this whole sequence is very special for me as I rarely play the puck that much in the first place. I wouldn't get much time to reflect on this, however, as Butte began shelling me again in response. All had seemed to be going well until the Quake got into penalty trouble, managing to send 2 guys to the box again, giving the Cobras a 4-on-3 power play. So to say we were really up against it would be an understatement here. I would make some nice saves to start until a 3-on-1 broke and they scored. That's fine. 3-on-1s were very successful odd man rushes. We can come back again just fine. I'm being pulled. What? Why am I being pulled here? Was I supposed to stop the 3-on-1? None of the goals leading up to that were soft goals. And the game is tied, too. We're not even losing. I have never seen any coach do this at any legitimate level. I'm getting off topic here. The game's still going on. I'll focus on this decision later. Just like the last time we got scored on, Quake answered quickly, and that answer came in the form of a top shelf snipe from Luke Harkey, once again putting the Quake up 5-4. At the start of the third period, defenseman Evan Snyder scores a questionable goal below the goal line. Butte quickly responds with a goal of their own, but it's not enough as the Yellowstone Quake close out in their first victory of the season. You might be wondering why the third period was so short compared to the first two. Well, outside of the goal from Snyder and the goal from Butte, almost nothing of note happened during the third. Michael Allman's relief effort was painfully average. Remember all those tough saves I had to make in the first and second period? Michael had none of that. Let's take a look at all of Michael Allman's saves during this relief of me. To top it off, the goal he let in was almost the exact same play of the first save I made during the game. This game could have been 6-4 and I could have gotten my first win of the season. That's not how the game went though. I won't be all negative towards Michael, however. Even though the shots he faced were relatively easy, he did stop all of the shots he had to get the win. It's not like he wanted to go in. It was my coach's choice to put him in. Now, there are times when you should pull a goalie and times when you shouldn't. So far, he's 1 out of 2 on pulling goalies. The first time he pulled me, I understood what he wanted to do. He thought that we could rebound back if he replaced the goalie early enough. Unfortunately for him, that didn't exactly happen. I'll chalk this one up to be a nervous mistake on his behalf. By now you've probably gotten familiar with some of the names on the team, particularly Dylan Rumpke and Luke Harkey. These two were more or less the only reason we weren't blown out every game, as they provided primary scoring for the team. Our ranks were starting to get bolstered, however, with defenseman Zach Kelly, who had the beautiful stick check in the last game, and former USHL draft pick Nick Castro. Game 2 against Butte wouldn't be much different from the first, though a hat trick from Nick Castro and several clutch saves from me would stick out. I would be pulled again while the game was tied and watched from the bench as Michael Allman, having to go in cold again, led in 2 soft goals to force overtime where the Cobras would beat us 8-7. Discussing this game would ultimately be a waste of time, as the same issues from last game were still haunting us in this game. The only real difference maker was that Butte's coach adjusted to us, while our coach just yelled vague instruction to us from the bench rather than change our game plan. At this point, my confidence was real low. Getting pulled in 3 straight games, despite some very solid efforts and 2 of them did very little to change his coach's perception of me on the ice. Despite still referring to Michael and I as both being number 1 goalies, his words did little to further his panicked actions of simply thinking, change the goalies, when things weren't going his way. I thought this was as low as I could be, but I soon found out there's a whole other level I could sink down to. It was around this point after the Butte games when I first heard of Paul Hopner's death. During the first couple of days after finding this out, I tried to mourn privately within the confines of the house I lived in, while still participating in team activities. Keeping this pain to myself wouldn't be easy, however, as teammates began to figure out something was wrong very quickly and tried their best to offer me support. Over this period, hockey began losing meaning to me as I fell into a downward spiral, consumed by the grief I felt towards a lost friend and being surrounded by the great failures of a once great hockey dynasty. At some point during all of this grief, something snapped in the back of my mind. A voice popped into my head and told me, if you're going to win, you're going to do it for Paul, and you're going to earn it through every bad turnover, breakaway, or deflection. I had to wait a whole week, but when I got back in, you could tell I was a changed man between the pipes. This game would be memorable for many different reasons. It would mark the first game of our cancer awareness jerseys, which are probably the best thing to come out of the organization from this whole year. It would be memorable for adding the likes of Tayson Garrodi, Sandis Cook, Aaron Finneman, and infamously Caleb Phillips into the lineup. Why is Caleb an infamous addition, you may ask? Well, he went out on his first shift after being quiet and did this to somebody. Then promptly got ejected. This game was also the last game Dylan Rumpke would play for a long time as he broke his ankle sliding into the boards, which meant that our scoring depth would go down from 3 to 2 players, those 2 being Nick Castro and Luke Harkey. The lack of scoring would be very evident as the final score would be 8-2, with poor Michael having to deal with a beatdown from the Bozeman Ice Dogs. He would get pulled after the 8th goal, giving me the chance to show my newfound conviction to the coach. Though my relief in this game was short, I made a lot of very good saves throughout the duration of my time in net. I didn't allow any rebounds and snuffed out several great 1-0 opportunities to keep my save percentage at a clean 1,000. Bozeman wasn't making this easy on me either. I had over 10 shots during my relief of about 5 minutes. They didn't have to make it 9-0, but they really wanted to. There's no moment more true to this than when one player went hard on a breakaway with less than 10 seconds left in the game. The reason for this intensity was probably because Caleb nearly killed one of their kids, but I'll never know for sure. I just knew that I made a statement with this game. Whatever challenge awaited ahead of me, I was ready for it. During the next weekend, we would face the Butte Cobras again, and surprisingly, Michael and I would split the games like an actual goalie tandem, with him getting game 1 and me getting game 2. Despite Luke Harkey recording a record-breaking 7 goals during the first game, he would get no help, and we would somehow lose the game 8-7. If this hadn't obliterated our sense of confidence yet, then our coach coming into the locker room and delivering a freakout so legendary that I would have a genuine fear for my well-being definitely would. This wouldn't discourage me. At this point my objective was simple. Play the whole 60 minutes of the game and win it for Paul. My mind couldn't conceive of any other way the next day could possibly go. I remember the drive to the rink vividly. As golden rays of sunlight flowed through the air and casted long shadows from the trees around me, I kept my head looking straight forward, my eyes unfocused. I didn't speak to anyone during the day, only preparing what I needed for the game and waiting anxiously, visualizing countless plays in my head. As I stepped into the car with my billet mother, a sense of dread entered my mind. We drove a couple minutes before she put her hand on my shoulder, telling me everything would be alright. Fighting back tears, I looked back at her and responded, "Thanks," before walking into the rink and leaving the sense of dread I had carried with me behind. The beginning of the game would be a fierce back and forth as the Quake and Cobras exchanged chances. Though Butte seemed to have more energy within the opening minutes, the Quake would hold their own pretty well. Our second line would show a great deal of guts during the opening period, stepping up in a big way after being practically invisible the night prior. Butte would start getting some puck luck, as a broken pass would careen towards the gaping net mouth. I was lucky enough to throw my skate into it to stop it from crossing. The last thing we needed was a soft goal to start the game. We needed to get the lead first, and we needed to keep it the whole game if we wanted to win. A delayed penalty would be called on the Cobras, putting us on the power play. While the Quake would get a nice opportunity, it was Butte who would get the best scoring chance out of the Quake's power play.
9 seconds remaining on the power play. Finneman now is going to carry it up 2 seconds. They'll put Butte at full strength. 2-on-0 coming.
And here we are, a moment in the making. After months of struggle, it had come down to this play. After months of getting turned away with seeds of doubt being planted in the back of my mind about my future playing hockey, it had led to this moment. This is a man who had had enough of being lied to, of being a victim of circumstances out of his control. Now with a mindset to be able to change the path that I was doomed to travel down, I was ready to make a statement. For myself, for my team, and for Paul. Welcome to my turning point. I could give no words for the feelings I felt after the save. All that mattered was getting everyone else to buy in and take control of the game. It would start with Nick Castro leveling a kid in open eyes, which led Will Yates to come down from the point and score his first career goal, 1-0 Yellowstone. Butte wasn't ready to lay down yet, as they entered the zone and had a wide open net to score on. The thing was that I wasn't willing to lay down either. I would make a desperation reach back save with my pads, stunning the Cobras forward mere feet from the crease. But we weren't done yet. Butte would immediately get the puck back and bomb a shot from the point. Now it was Sandus Cook's turn to step up as he took the shot to the leg and stopped it from reaching the net. But we weren't done yet. Will Yates flew down the ice, beating out 2 Butte defensemen to the puck with his blinding speed. He was all by himself, and he walked in, cut across the crease, and tucked the puck home, getting his second of the game. 2-0 Yellowstone. And that's how we left the period. No last-minute tying goals, no goalies being pulled. None of that. For the first time, we were in complete control of the game. In between periods, our coach didn't talk to us. He was so defeated from the last game he had given up coaching us. It's ironic that in the one game he decided to do that, we would not only leave the period scoreless, which only happened one other time the whole year, but looked the best we had all season. It was time for the second period now. Despite a brilliant 7-goal performance last game, Hartke pulled off some more magic by netting another goal, making it his 8th of the weekend. 3-0 Yellowstone. Shortly after this, Yates with his stunning speed beat Butte's defender back to his own goal, not only canceling the icing, but being able to feed it to Castro, with one simple flick of the wrist, put the Quake up by 4. This would be the largest lead we would have during the whole season. It was at this point, however, that Butte had enough. Things would begin to become much more hectic in our zone as I became more and more busy. Eventually, we would get called for a penalty, and Butte would capitalize on it, taking our lead down to only 3 goals. This goal didn't change anything for me, however, as I would battle through and make some more tough saves to keep the Quake in the game. Despite my best efforts though, Butte would notch another goal onto the board with the beauty of a snipe. No one on the Quake was ready to give up, however, as Castro took the puck from the face-off and almost scored again, unfortunately putting the puck into the netting on a wide-open net. A crazy sequence where I'd lose my catching glove out of a net-mouth scramble and fortunately get it back on in time to make a beauty of a grab during the same play would keep momentum on our side. Capitalizing on the Quake's dominance would be Hartke again, scoring his 9th of the weekend to put us up 5-2. Everyone was buying in as Yates demolished the kid coming through our blue line. It seemed every nice save I made I would get repaid with a great play on the other end of the ice. The period would end as Ryan Lovelace would almost get his first career goal, but unfortunately rang off the post, leaving the Quake up against Butte 5-2. As the third period started, things began to get very chippy as the Quake and Cobras would swap hits until a blatant blindside hit would send the play to a grinding halt. At this point, Butte was struggling to keep up with us. As there was about 13 minutes left, I burned off some nervous energy by doing some creative skating drills during a timeout as Butte would get back on the power play. They would score shortly after this, cutting the lead down to 2 again with around 12 minutes left to go in the game. Aaron Finneman would add another challenge to the board for the Quake, scoring his first career goal during the game as well, making the score 6-3. With every fist bump after each goal, the reality of the Quake getting this win became more and more of a reality. With half the period remaining, it was my job to keep it that way. Butte would start applying pressure again, and I would respond with a nice glove save, and a save that was unfortunately not caught on camera, but very reminiscent of a Marc-Andre Fleury Stanley Cup winning save from 2009. Shots would continue to pour on net, however, forcing me to make another nice glove save with the flash at the level. It didn't end there, however, as I had to make another athletic stop across the crease with a little over 2 minutes left to go. Butte would eventually get one past me from a rebound from an uncovered guy in front. With hopes of a comeback in their future, Butte pulled their goalie, and in response, Luke Hartke brought them back to reality, finishing the Cobras off with an empty net goal, his 10th of the weekend. And like that, the game was over. A statement win for the team and myself as I proved I was still capable in net. It was truly a storybook ending as months of hardship finally manifested themselves into a tangible reward. This is the note I hope to be remembered for, as my time in Yellowstone would come to an end shortly after this. The Quake wouldn't win another game until their last homestand of the season. I would stay in Yellowstone for a while longer, but at this point, there was nothing there to keep me from leaving. An interview with the coach after this pinnacle win would reveal his true intentions for who he intended to play over the course of the season, which soured my perception of him to the point where I couldn't play under him any longer and expect to grow. I would request a trade shortly after discovering this. It turned out the reason why Coach Theros and his players left was because of this new coach. In the words of my billet mother, it wasn't that Theros was leaving, it was that was a idiot. Leaving was very hard. I had come to love this team like a family. The hardest person to leave behind was my billet mother. While I haven't mentioned her much, her love and support transcended just keeping her house for players to stay in. She truly was a second mother to me. When I eventually did return home, my first night back had me dream of meeting Paul Hobner within CVU. He gave me a warm grin as I shook his hand and told him thank you. Whether this be a spiritual meeting or just a dream, I will never truly know, though I intend to believe the former. I would continue to get rewarded for my hard work as assigned to be a part of the New Hampshire Avalanche. In their 2-year existence, they have won the league championship twice and committed over 30 players to play in college. And unlike the Quake, their coach isn't resigning, and the only players leaving from the team are the ones going to play college. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm fortunate enough to have it continue for the next 2 years. To all the good and bad moments throughout this journey, they shaped me to where I am now, and and for that, I'm truly grateful.